Natasha survived, by either sheer dumb luck or absolute determination. It was handled, well as it was ever going to be. She hated fighting against her fiancé, even if it was big glowing green that was out front. She had Bruce for a moment or two, but it was done. She couldn't focus on him right now, or she'd end up in a cell too. No, she knew where she was going. She'd have a bit of time to get there, knowing that Karla was going after Sharon as well. When Natasha arrived back at Avengers Island, it was buzzing. People were scattering. Some tried to ask her questions, but she didn't hear any of them as she walked through, her route clear as she headed down to Karla's office. She'd show back up here. She'd have to. There would be a pile of paperwork to go through over Hulk alone. The write-ups might rain down, but when people don't listen to what she, of all people, would suggest. No one was stopping her. Too much else going on. She went straight to the office door that she cursed not too long ago. It was locked, but she was a widow. Locks meant little. It took seconds for her to break in, making sure not to mar the locks and have that added to today's grievances. She didn't turn on the main lights, but one by the desk. She flopped down, sore as hell. But this needed to be dealt with before she went to see how banged up she was. She looked around the room. It was just obnoxious without Karla being in there. Natasha leaned forward and started the metronome, but put to an andante setting, 80 BPM for now. Natasha's face was emotionless as her brain went back to hearing the instructor's staff striking the floor at nearly the same beat as the widows danced. She let the memory play out as she sat back in the chair. As she absent-mindedly played with the Newton's cradle that was near her, but not letting it fully clack before she turned the light off and kicked her heel up on the corner of the desk. Events had progressed almost precisely as Karla had planned. The Hulk situation had escalated completely beyond control. Even that absurd armor that Natasha had worn was virtually destroyed, resulting in an even more property damage. The optics of the Hulk not even being able to control himself in front of his alleged girlfriend was a further feather in her cap in terms of painting the two as a liability. Although, if she were being honest with herself, it was hardly a false narrative. Additionally, and as a bonus, Sharon Carter, known international criminal, had been apprehended as a result. All in all, a relatively successful endeavor. When Karla had re-entered Avengers Island, her costume dematerialized from her, revealing her clinical, professional clothes beneath. The quick change was a fantastic property of the gravity stone bonded to her central nervous system. Granted, she could have simply phased in through the roof directly into her office, but where would the fun in that have been? No, she wanted to see the chaos unfolding around her. People scrambling in the operations center, the sheer havoc of them all not knowing what to do, because they couldn't control the weapon allegedly under their purview. Sadly, Karla had warned them all, really, about such a catastrophic event. She didn't overplay her hand, however, and now it seemed, in the wake of all this destruction, that their eyes and ears were primed for recommendations moving forward. As they should be. When Karla stepped into the office and flipped on the light, only to turn and see Natasha, the widow would win a small victory in the psychiatrist's response when she was visibly startled, something that didn't happen to the woman often, if ever. When Karla caught her breath and got her bearings, she only narrowed her eyes and shook her head with a bit dramatic, don't you think? Karla said as she moved to the front of her own desk, arms folded. Get out of my chair before I move you out of my chair. If Nat thought she was going to pull punches in this scenario, she was highly mistaken. If I were you, I'd probably refocus my efforts on something constructive, like, say, procuring some envelopes and stationery with which to write letters to my soon-to-be incarcerated significant other. A smile. Oh, that hateful, hateful smile. Careful, Nat, Karla teased. You don't want to end up like Bruce. What was she doing here? She was letting her emotions take too much control. She wanted Karla to suffer for what she had started, for riling Green with that meeting that the three of them had had. Would she go rogue and attack? Would it really be going rogue? Her mind was running all sorts of scenarios of where Bruce was being sent. Her heart was breaking, and she wanted someone to blame. Natasha closed her eyes as she could hear someone out in the hall. Slow breaths were taken to keep her cool, to try to calm her mind. The door opened and the lights came on. She slowly opened her eyes to see the shock on Karla's face. Natasha's expression was flat, default, nothing. She didn't move as Karla tutted her. Natasha said nothing as Karla moved to the front of the desk, even with the threats. There would be no getting a rise out of the widow. She dropped her feet down to the floor and got up, but not because of Karla's taunts. She walked back to the door and locked it, leaning against it with her arms crossed. You pushed him to this. It wasn't all you, but you started this. You wanted him to crack, she finally said as she looked at Karla. Want to share where you're carting him off to and for how long? They seemed like questions, but she was demanding answers without yelling or demolishing this office like she wanted to do. What Natasha wouldn't realize, at least possibly not in this exact moment, but likely would later after the widow had some time to reflect, was that by her showing up in this office, Karla had already won. The fact that she was even present right here in this moment meant that she'd already lost whatever point was that she'd hoped to make. Did I? Her tone sounded shocked, hurt even. Karla moved to take a seat behind the desk. Her desk. She leaned into it, smiling. I haven't the foggiest what actually made him crack. It could be any number of things, to be honest. Starting with the fact that you, at least this version of you, she did say that part dismissively, isn't even the one that Dr. Banner had fallen in love with. A low blow, given that Natasha of this reality had sacrificed herself in order to save the universe, essentially. Hard to say, though, really, she said, her voice introspective, casting her eyes to the side as if she were still deep in thought. Then again, he kept the glass memory fiasco away from you. He said to spare you from it, of course, fragile as you might be. Didn't want you going off the rails like, well, I suppose he is now. Classic displacement. The defense mechanism in which a person redirects an emotional reaction from the rightful recipient onto another person or object. Did Karla believe that was actually the case? A bit of an irrelevant distinction, surely. I imagine that will largely depend on the physical state we find him in once that silly little man calms down. Emasculating him in front of his fiancée was the icing on the cake. Rest assured that no matter how many connections you have, or how many databases you hack, or how many favors you call in across every shadowy government conspiracy shop in this world, Natasha! Her voice was sing-song in this moment, a happy sigh in which she'd said this last part. I'll make certain you never see him again. Natasha's mind was set on the fact that Karla had done this to Bruce, that she had pushed him way too far during that meeting that they had. She was a shit therapist, and nothing would change Natasha's mind about that. And all that insanity, all of the radiation, all of the suit getting an arm lobbed off by the half-wit in the doorway, Natasha was surprisingly calm. It wasn't another fight that she was looking for, but it was definitely her wanting Karla to admit her fault in all of this and get some sort of information on where Bruce was going to get hauled off it. Knowingly fired at Bruce, and she knew it would enrage him more. All of it. If Natasha had wanted Karla to suffer, the room would have been destroyed. Those pens broken into bits above all. If she wanted to send a warning shot, she would have done it. She suppressed all emotions as she knew that was where Karla would make her attacks. She watched as Karla took her seat, blinking slowly at the taunts. Again, there was no change in her demeanor, even if that cut deeper than Natasha had ever thought it would. In the back of her mind, a voice reminded her that Bruce came to get her from her timeline. He cared enough to put a ring on her finger and ask her to marry him. Fuck Karla and her petty jabs. She smiled as Karla took another jab by belittling Bruce's condition. It meant he wasn't detained yet. A mental checklist was just ticked off as she needed to get back out there to look for him, or at least find a trail. I honestly wish you all the luck with your endeavors to keep us apart, she said as sickeningly sweetly as she could as she reached back to undo the lock. Hearing what she did, she didn't care about the other reasons why she'd come here. Natasha opened the door again as she made the plan to see Tony and have him check the city for Bruce's whereabouts and see about fixing and upgrading the suit. You're a bitter bitch, and I wished we were on the same side now and then. She shrugged her shoulder as she looked at Karla and then turned to leave the office. Not that she would ever admit it on any level, but Karla was quite surprised that Natasha was keeping it all together. The woman simply had to be seething underneath the surface. After all, She was watching her life disintegrate before her very eyes. Lover run off to who knows where and then being told that once he was found that she'd never see him again? As well connected as Nat was, and to be clear, she was well connected on both official and unofficial channels, Karla was being backed by the President of the United States. The Thunderbolts held significant sway and operational authority to do, well, almost anything. That, in particular, made Karla very, very happy. "I don't need luck," Karla said, leaning back in her chair. So comfortable, so casual. It was as if she were having a chat with a dear friend. Her body language showed no tension whatsoever. She even answered her in that similar friendly tone. "I have authority." The last word hung in the air like a noose, looking to wrap around her throat and pull. When Nat called her a bitter bitch, however, the most saccharine of smiles had crossed her face. "But we are on the same team, Nat," again calling her by the name that only her friends and loved ones called her. It was the most subtle turn of the dagger that Karla enjoyed the most. "We're here to protect an unsuspecting populace from the dangers this world has to offer. Dangers like your soon-to-be ex-fiancé. For as much good as the Hulk could do, he was also a weapon of mass destruction. He'd need to be dealt with, of course, all in due time. In truth, Karla didn't know where the hell he'd gone, but as soon as Natasha had left the office, she picked up the phone. "I want full surveillance and everything else we've got put on Natasha Romanoff. She's going to lead us to Banner." "That's right, Nat. Go ahead and do the work for us," she thought to herself, chuckling.